everyone. Happy Tuesday. I hope you're having a wonderful day and a wonderful week. My name is Jessa Blackthorne. Welcome to Much Ado About Gaming. Today's show is actually a little bit different. Normally I stream the show live. Today's show is actually pre-recorded, so I won't be able to answer any of your questions live, but I will be in the chat answering questions there. So if you have a question, you'll still see me answering them. I just won't be able to answer them verbally because I'm pre-recording this right now. But it's still going to be a great show for you today. So today's show is going to be an interview with Andrew Beardsley. Andrew is the designer behind Zombie Princess and the Enchanted Maze. He's a great guy. We got a great interview for you. This game is so cool. It's so exciting. I'm really, really excited to be able to interview Andrew because the game it's really, really fun, and I'm really looking forward to it. So, without further ado, like I said, welcome to Much Ado About Gaming, the show about WizKids Board Games. As a reminder, this show is a show about board games. I am not able to answer any questions about the other product lines on this show, unfortunately. However, if you do have questions or if you see anything and you're not sure, keep an eye on WizKids' social media. That's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. That's going to be the best place to get the most up-to-date information about all of the things we're releasing. We have so much exciting stuff, and that's going to be the best place to get information about it. But without further ado, let's get started with my interview with Andrew Beardsley, designer of Zombie Princess and the Enchanted Maze. All right, and I am now here with Andrew Beardsley, the designer behind Zombie Princess and the Enchanted Maze. Andrew, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk about this game with you. It's so great, and it's such a gorgeous game, and I haven't gotten it to the table quite yet. I'm hoping to be able to play it this weekend. Fingers crossed, because I really want to play it. But it seems amazing. And the theme is so fun, too, and it's just really cool and different. So just tell me, what inspired you to create Zombie Princess and the Enchanted Maze?
Well, I started working on this about 4 or 5 years ago. And before this, I hadn't designed any board games at all. And it started off as a hobby, to be honest. I played tons of games when I was a kid. And then when I was in my adult years, I didn't play games for years and ages. And then I had this idea for a game that popped in my head one Christmas. And the idea was to create the game that I would have loved to have had as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And I was obsessed with mazes as a kid. And I loved the idea of a maze game where you could build the maze yourself and manipulate it. And that's where I started. So I started off with the idea of this game that I would have absolutely loved to have as a child. And it developed from there. And it started off as a hobby. And I just made a little prototype of these pieces that you could rotate and manipulate and build. And I got to the table with some friends. We played it, and it was a disaster. It was over in about 5 minutes. So that was my first lesson in game design. So make your prototype, test it, and then find out what went wrong. And the maze was too small, and it developed from there. So yeah, and it's just been an amazing journey ever since.
Incredible. So do you think little Andrew would have liked this game now with where it is?
Well, that's the idea. Yeah. I wanted to create a game that was immediately accessible, but enticing and intriguing. And I think mazes have this mystery about them, and people want to explore them, and people want to be inside a puzzle.
Right.
And a puzzle that you can manipulate yourself is even more exciting, because then you're building the puzzle and you're solving it at the same time. So that's what I wanted this game to do.
Yeah.
And I hope that when people play it, they'll realize it and have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, like I said, I haven't gotten it to the table yet, but everything you're saying kind of resonates with me in terms of like having read the rules and kind of, when you read the rules of a game, you play an imaginary game in your head.
Yeah.
And it definitely sounds like what you're describing is what the experience is like, and I can't wait to try it.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little more about the design process specifically. What was that process like? Besides just iterating and obviously, the first one not being great and then getting to this final product.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I didn't know how to design games, and I think in a way that was in my favor because I hadn't played any modern board games at all. I just started. I thought I better play some games to find out what they're like. So I think that naivety was in my favor because I didn't know what I shouldn't be doing. I didn't know if there was the right way to do it. I just tried it, and I was having fun and experimenting. So again, it was about making prototypes. The difficult bit was creating the pieces, and the pieces are on these 2x2 tiles. And the iterative process of working out the number of maze tiles and the blockings and openings and paths and all the varieties, that was the big time consuming bit. And every time I changed the tile, I had to play test it. So there was a lot of calling on favor of friends and family, getting to the table, playing it, and also playing it with myself, which was a bit tedious, but it's necessary. And I'm a very hands-on, I'm an architect by trade. So I'm a very, very visual, three-dimensional thinking person. So that, again, I think feeds into this game, where it's about spatial puzzles and spatial design. So for my job, I'm always designing in 3D and looking at space and solving problems. Architecture is all about solving problems. And I think board game design is also about solving problems. You have yourself restrictions, and you need to find a way of making a situation fun and challenging and exciting and surprising within this limited system. So that covers all games, but this game, I also wanted it to tell a story. So I was thinking about how you have a beginning, middle, and end of a story. But I knew there needed to be some threat in the maze. It originally started off as the Minotaur in the maze in Knossos in Crete, but I thought that's too obvious. I wanted it to have some humor. So I was actually working closely with my illustrator, Luke Webb, who's done fantastic illustrations for the game.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail, but we were sitting in my garden with bits of the game in front of us, and we were discussing the theme, and I said it needs to be funny, it needs to be different, but it also and it needs to be tied in with the maze, obviously, because the maze is intrinsic. So we came up with this idea of a hedge maze, and who would be trapped in the hedge maze? We need something that is suitable, but also a bit original. So we came up with this idea, this princess who's become a zombie, who created the maze for her own amusement, and then it all went horribly wrong, and now she's stuck there. So, and I'm hoping that the humor comes through. And I love the idea that in horror films, there's this idea, there's a real connection between being scared and laughing. So when you're feeling under threat and there's something bad about to get you, when you get through it, you laugh as a release. And I find that this game brings about these feelings when you're being threatened by the princess, she's about to get you. There's a push your luck element as to whether you try and creep past her. And then when you do and you get away with it, everyone's laughing because they see the tension and the release of the tension. So am I answering your question? I'm not sure. I'm just going off
you are. This is super. I'm really intrigued, especially because you said that you hadn't really played any modern board games when you went into this, and you kind of approached it from an architectural background. I think that's super interesting because it, when you think of game design, there's a variety of ways that you can go about it, but the kind of the process overall tends to be very similar. But you're approaching it from completely left field. And just, diving in from a different direction. And it really speaks to how there's no one right way to design a game.
Exactly.
You can be successful even, not having studied contemporary games, not having, a background in game theory in any way. And I find that really interesting. So we're going to come back to Lou because I do want to ask you about your work with Lou.
Absolutely.
The art's amazing. But tell me, what about the biggest challenges in your design process?
I think the biggest challenges with this game in particular was getting the pieces right.
Okay.
Because there are 48 unique maze pieces, and you have no idea how many iterations I went through to get the balance right of the maze, because as I said, the first maze was too small, so the game was over in 5 minutes, and everyone said, well, that was rubbish, what are you talking about, that wasn't, so which was funny in itself. So that obviously the maze needed to be bigger, which meant more pieces. And then it was about how open and closed does the maze need to be, because the maze, there's an almost infinite number of permutations with the pieces. I needed to make sure that the maze was not too open, that the players can just rattle through,
Right.
and solve the maze really quickly, but I didn't need it to be so closed that it would be frustrating and people were just moving one step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So the challenge was getting that sweet spot of being able to explore, but also being blocking other players and being blocked yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
it's still being fun.
Right.
So that was the biggest challenge. And I also set myself a massive challenge because originally I was designing the prototype in 3 dimensions because I'm an
Mm-hmm.
architect, so
Yes.
I make 3 dimensional spaces. So I wanted it
Mm-hmm.
to be this kind of incredibly extravagant 3D piece, which obviously was never going to
Right.
be. The reality of the situation is that it ends
Mm-hmm.
up in 2 dimensions, but still it's fantastic. So the actual making of the pieces was quite time consuming.
Mm-hmm.
But I found that process very therapeutic and very enjoyable, just making something, testing it, making it.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a pleasure to do. And then testing the game with people and seeing
Mm-hmm.
the fun they have with each change you make, and whether or that a change you make doesn't make them laugh or smile
Right.
or create tension, and then working out what it is. Um, yeah, it was a fascinating process.
Did
And I
you
think
go
go on,
ahead?
sorry.
No, 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 go ahead.
I was going to say I think also not knowing about modern board games when I started
Mm-hmm.
was I did find out very quickly that roll and move was a big no-no. So
Yes.
so I thought, okay, things have changed a bit since when I was a
Mm-hmm.
kid.
Right.
So and I love the incorporation of random elements with dice, and I think that's very important because it does create tension and excitement
Mm-hmm.
with the controlled unknowns, as I call them, and the movement of the princess is controlled by this dice, which may move her or may not. So,
Right.
but the distance she moves isn't controlled by the dice, and the distance the players have moved are not controlled by the dice.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was sort of as I was designing the game, I was playing more and more modern board games and
Mm-hmm.
learning lessons from them all as in
Yeah.
parallel with my own design process. So I think the
Right.
game would have been maybe different if I'd known about other games, but it wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be the same game. It would be a complete different game. So
Gotcha.
yeah,
Yeah, it's almost like a subversion of the roll and move mechanic,
yeah,
kind of the way you approached it in this game.
yeah.
So what was your, I mean, you kind of answered this, I guess, but what was your favorite part of the design process overall?
Oh, the well, again, it was about. I just enjoy making things, so it's about
Hmm.
making and I find what's also very pleasurable for me is when I've made something and then I spend a lot of time. There's a lot of thinking time going on in board game design. I didn't realize
Hmm.
this, and it happens when I'm not doing sitting down with my notebooks and my bits of paper and my
Right.
pens and my card, and it happens when I'm at the gym or in the shower or on the
Hmm.
bus or going for a walk, and then
Hmm.
a little idea will pop in or something where I can tweak something
Hmm.
and develop the design, and that's intensely pleasurable because then you can go back and try it out and see if it works or not.
Hmm.
And thinking through these design changes in your head, um, and and then testing them to see if your predictions come true.
Hmm.
There's quite that's quite enjoyable and interesting, and sometimes unsuccessful. So
So then what would you say the biggest surprise was or the most unexpected part of the design process for you?
I think it was how long it took.
Hmm.
As I said, I'd started this as a hobby. I didn't intend to try and pick. I didn't think I'm going to make a game that I'm going to pitch to publishers. This
Right.
started as something to do one Christmas when I had some time off work,
Hmm.
and I thought I'll do this for fun. And there
Yeah.
was never in my mind would I ever thought I'd be having a conversation with you and the
Hmm.
game about to be released. I had no, that was not on my radar at all. So, but the fact that it took so long
Yeah.
to get it to get the design to a finished stage where it could be
Uh-huh.
presented, and then the work that we did with Zev and you guys once it picked it up, that was
Hmm.
surprising, and that was probably because of my naivety when I started. Um, it's a bit like making well, I don't know, is it a bit like making a film? There's so many moving parts, literally moving
Right.
parts in my game.
Hmm.
Um, so the time it took to go through the design process and get it right was the biggest surprise, I think.
Hmm.
Um, no, actually, no, that's not true. The biggest surprise that people had a great time playing it,
Oh,
and that's the best surprise.
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, so that's all we can hope for, isn't it?
Hmm. when your art works and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
people want to enjoy your art other than you.
It's kind of magic, isn't it? It's just kind of,
Yeah.
it's such a pleasurable thing to see 4 or 5 people sitting
Hmm.
around a table with something you've made, and they're having a good time and laughing. It's such a good feeling. So,
Absolutely.
and I didn't know board games could do that. You know,
Well,
it's kind of, it's so to be part of that is just such a pleasure.
yeah, I can I can imagine how exciting that must be, especially as someone like you said who doesn't come from board games,
Yeah,
comes
yeah,
from a different background, hasn't designed a game before, wasn't really
yeah,
familiar with modern board games, and really capturing that joy.
yeah,
I think that's incredible.
yeah.
So let's talk about working with Lou and the
Okay.
art. What was that process like?
I mean, Lou and I have been friends for years, so and I
Hmm.
know he's a great illustrator, and he's also he got into board games at the same time as me, really. So, and I said I'm working on this game, and he's been really working
Hmm.
close with me on the development of the design as well. So he was one of my first play testers, and he would
Hmm.
work through problems with me. And every time I changed something, I'd phone him up, and he'd come over, and we'd say, "Oh, that's rubbish," or "This is great." And we knew we wanted the game to be visually distinctive and
Hmm.
also have a sense of humor. Um, and also, I don't know if this is right, but I feel like it's sort of got a slight English sense of humor in that it's set in this garden maze,
Hmm.
which I grew up near Hampton Court Maze, which is Henry VIII's palace,
Oh
and
wow.
it was built. It wasn't built by Henry VIII, but it was built by some other king. I can't remember. It's about 300 years old. So it's one of the oldest edge
Hmm.
mazes in the world. And we went
Really.
there for inspiration. It's a
Hmm.
fantastic place. There's so much history, and we wanted the visual style to evoke a sense of humor, but also a kind of a mashup between the sort of the traditional fairy tale and the way exploring through a maze can tell a story, but then with
Hmm.
the sense of humor where we brought in this sort of slightly 80s vibe.
That's what
And
I was about to ask about. Yeah.
I mean, that just came in as a kind of like
Hmm.
we've got to do this because I'm a child of the 80s.
Right.
It's a real touchstone for my aesthetic
Hmm.
sensibilities, um, and it just added another dimension. I mean, it's been done before with Shrek and things like that, but
Yeah.
so the first illustrations Lou did with these beautiful sort of watercolory, almost like 1960s Disney stuff, and I said, Lou, they're
Hmm.
fantastic, but it's got to be angular and it's got to be edgy
Hmm.
because the maze is so angular. So he worked up some prototypes with angles and more aggressive and geometric. And every time
Hmm.
I did it, I said, do it more, do it more. So the
Yeah.
zombie princess's hair, it got bigger and bigger and more angular, and the clothes got more ridiculous. And
Hmm.
we brought in this kind of 80s aerobics outfit, and
Yeah.
the knights all had characters as well. So
Hmm.
we originally came up with names for the knights, although they don't have them in the game, but it
Hmm.
gave them personalities which suggested the little one of them's the vain knight, and he has a
Right.
Polaroid camera. He's taking pictures of himself,
Hmm.
and this just helped us to develop characters for the personalities for the characters,
Hmm.
which kind of brings the game to life, I think, when you're playing it. Um, and I will probably come to this later on, but there was a wonderful moment
Hmm.
when I was playtesting the game at an expo in Birmingham in the first time I took it out to the public.
Hmm.
And we were playing it with a dad and his son, and he was about 6. He was really young, and he was a bit too young for the game. But
Hmm.
there's a moment in the game where if you get caught by the zombie princess, you get turned into a zombie. And he was fascinated by these zombies. And when he got caught, because he didn't really know what he
Hmm.
was doing, he was only 6, and
Right.
he was so happy. And he said, "I'm a zombie, Daddy, I'm a zombie." And
Oh.
it was so sweet. And um, so this idea of progression and storytelling brought in the fairy tale aspect and the
Hmm.
80s style, and then this really angular color. And color is important. Lou's such a fantastic colorist. He went through
Hmm.
loads of tests of different colors with testing colors in relationship to each other, and the purple and the green.
Yeah.
I just think it looks fantastic.
Yeah, the art, I mean, the art is absolutely stunning.
Yeah,
I remember when we first got this at WizKids, and I remember seeing the art and being so smitten with it.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just so incredibly striking.
That's good
Like
to
you,
hear.
and especially just the color scheme and the way that you have like the geometric stuff going on, but also have this very watercolory color scheme.
Yeah,
It works really nicely
yeah,
together.
yeah,
I think, Lou and you working together on this did a great job.
yeah. Well, I've actually put on my Instagram account and on Board
Hmm.
Game Geek, I've actually posted some of the design development showing the character development that Lou's done. So it shows how the zombie princess and the knights developed from the original sketches through to the finished thing. So if people are interested, it's really interesting to see how an illustrator goes through a design process as well as the
Hmm.
designer.
Well, if you want to check those out, viewers, you can check that out on Andrew's Instagram, Zombie Princess Board Game, or on the BGG page for
Yep,
Zombie Princess and the Enchanted Maze.
good plug.
And yeah, um, so what was the moment that you knew this game is working? This is something that people should see outside of my, friends and family.
There are two moments with that. I think the first is when I realized people were having fun playing the
Mm-hmm.
prototypes. So that then I thought, okay. And then the second time, which really solidified it, was when I think we'll come into
Mm-hmm.
this, but how I got it pitched to Zev and WizKids.
You can go with that if you go
Yeah, and
on with that if
it's
you
also
want.
it's when when I'll tell you about the pitching process. What happened is that the UK Games Expo, which is the big games expo held in
Mm-hmm.
Birmingham in the UK every year, they have a competition called Speed Dating with the Publishers. So and I submitted I did what's the sheet called, the sheet you do for the I can't remember the name now.
The
The
cell
sale.
sheet.
I did a sales sheet. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a sales sheet. I submitted my game, the Zombie Princess, to this competition, not thinking it would even get anywhere. And then they
Mm-hmm.
emailed, so you've been selected. So okay. And then the next stage was to go there with the game and meet the publishers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still thinking, what am I doing? I'm not a game designer. This isn't a game that's going to, no one wants to play this.
Mm-hmm.
And I presented it to 10 different publishers. One of them was
Mm-hmm.
Zev,
Right.
and Zev said, I want to play it. And so the next
Mm-hmm.
day I had a playtest table on the Sunday, and Zev came
Mm-hmm.
along, and I was quite nervous, and I had the game set up. There was a couple who were playing it with me, and I said, "Come
Mm-hmm.
join the game, Zev." So he sat down,
Right.
and we started the game. And it was then that I realised actually I might have something that could be for real, could be
Mm-hmm.
published, because I've got this fantastic publisher
Mm-hmm.
who's sitting in front of me playing the game. And we started the game, and I was quite nervous,
Right.
Zev was quite. I mean, Zev's a great guy, and he's really
Mm-hmm.
charismatic, and he's got a big person. He wasn't giving anything away when we started playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few turns in, the game starts off quite slowly. I want to
Right.
talk about the idea of a story, so it has quite a slow, kind of cautious start, and it ramps
Mm-hmm.
up. And there's this moment in the game where bits of the maze connect and characters start to interact with each other, and that's the kind of the moment where people get hooked. And I saw
Mm-hmm.
Zev's expression change, and he smiled.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can't remember exactly, but ultimately he said, "Oh, I want to publish this," and I nearly fell off my chair. So I think it wasn't until that moment that I realized I
Mm-hmm.
had something that was viable. Um, but yeah, and it was just an incremental process.
Mm-hmm.
It was not, none of it was planned, bizarrely. And here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah.
So I mean, let's kind of go deeper into that. The way that the story kind of feeds into the game, because the game does have a story. For
Yeah.
those of you who watched my unboxing, we did read the plot line of the game, so check that out if you haven't. But tell me how that kind of informs the actual execution of the gameplay of the game.
Well, the game starts off with four knights being drawn to the maze. This
Mm-hmm.
is before the game starts. They hear a scream coming from them from somewhere, and they're drawn
Mm-hmm.
towards this maze. And they think, when they get there, they think there's someone who needs help. So they enter the maze, and then as soon as they get in the maze, they realize actually there's something very wrong, and the person that they're trying to save doesn't need their help, and she's out to get them, and they're trapped.
Right.
So, and the maze starts off blank. There's the
Mm-hmm.
princess is in the center in her ruined castle,
Mm-hmm.
and the four knights start in the corners, and there's nothing in the maze at all. So you're gradually exploring the maze, all you know is you've got to find a key, and you've got to get out without
Mm-hmm.
getting caught. So it starts off very tentative and very abstract. There's nothing there really, and gradually the maze builds up, and there's a kind of a beginning. It's a bit like a story where you have the beginning, middle, and end. And the beginning is you don't know quite where this is going to lead. The middle part is where the maze is being built and the characters are moving around, and the zombie princess has started to move, and you're aware of her, and she's a bit of a threat, and the maze develops, and that's where you start finding your way and feeling your way through things, and you start to manipulate her and try and block other people. And then the third phase of the game is where the maze is almost complete. People have got their keys and it's chaos, and the princess is going all over the place. You don't know what's going to happen. You've got to get out as quickly as possible. So the tension and the complexity ramps up,
right,
until the kind of finale, when someone either escapes or worst case scenario, everyone is caught by the princess and everyone is turned into a zombie, which can happen, and which I think is hilarious when it does happen, and I quite like that. So that probably says more about me than anyone else.
So God, I'm really excited about this game.
Yeah.
And we've discussed it several times already in this interview. This is the first game that you've designed and published, but since then you mentioned this to me before we started talking, that you've designed other games since you designed this one. You kind of been by the game design bug. So
absolutely.
How is this different from other games you've designed, and what did you learn about design that's carried over into other designs you've created?
I think that there's one of the most important lessons I've learned, and this is from working directly with Zev and you guys at WizKids, is efficiency in design. And if you're looking to get your game published, you need to consider the practicalities of manufacture and the economies of actually having a game made and it being affordable and saleable. So when I approach a new game now, there's always a little bit of my brain that's thinking, how can I keep the components to a minimum and the game as simple as possible, while still have it being as fun and as tense and exciting as possible. So it's getting that balance. I'm never going to be a game designer who designs incredibly complex games with millions of pieces. It's not my style. I like quite simple games which have an immediacy to them, and that's something that's got, I think, constant with all the games I've designed since then. But I think my goal is to design the best game with the fewest components. That's kind of the holy grail of game design. Yeah. And there are some I'm thinking of Love Letter, which has got, I can't remember how many cards it's got 18 cards or something and a few tokens, and that's it. Yeah. Or Coup, things like that. Right. So what was your question? How's my game? How's my game? I do this.
How is Zombie Princess different than other games you've designed? Yeah. What did you learn during the process of making Zombie Princess that has translated into the games you've designed subsequent to that?
So I think the other thing I've learned, I think, is to anticipate design decisions before you make them. So with Zombie Princess, I was making changes and I wasn't entirely sure why until I'd made them. And now with experience and having gone through about half a dozen games I've been working on, some of them are complete, some of them are still in prototype stage, that I'm a quicker designer. You get quicker as you do it, and you can make decisions, and you can understand what isn't going to work sooner. Right. So I think that comes from experience. I'm not there yet. I've only got one game published under my belt. Right. So I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned. So it's about efficiency. It sounds very dry, doesn't it? Saying it's about efficiency and economy. But if you can make something work with fewer components and the minimum, throw everything at it at the start, and then take things away. Take the things you don't need away. So try everything, and then work out what isn't working, and be ruthless. If something isn't quite right, change it or get rid of it. Don't feel that, I like that, but it's not working, so I'm going to keep it in. If it's not working, then there's a reason for that, and either you work it out or you get rid of it and try it without it. Yeah. Because 9 times out of 10, you'll get rid of the thing that isn't making something work, and it will be a cleaner, purer game. It's a bit like sort of killing your darlings, but you've got to be quite ruthless.
Right. Yeah, I've had other designers on the show who've talked about like their favorite part of the game got cut out and they're disappointed, but they know it's a better game for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And then the things that you get ditched can be applied to other games later.
Right.
But yeah, keep it simple, keep it fun.
Hmm.
Just
That's also, I think that's pretty close to what your profile says on BGG. As a designer, I create simple
right.
games with a sense of humor, and I think that
Yeah,
definitely speaks
that's
to
what I aim for.
design philosophy, especially from
Yeah,
what you've just said. So,
yeah.
what is something that people might not realize about the game that you wanted to share so that, they can look out for it when they're playing Zombie Princess?
They might not realize that everyone can lose. There's, they, so when I say everyone can lose, they might not realize that everyone can get turned into a zombie, in which case the
Hmm.
zombie princess is the winner. And there are two ways to play the game. One way is where all the characters control the zombie princess.
Hmm.
And then there's an alternative way where one person can come in and control the zombie princess. Then it becomes a purely asymmetric game.
Hmm.
So sometimes the game wins, which again,
Hmm.
I think is quite nice,
Right.
because then when I've had instances where I've seen people play it and they're all zombies, they all say, let's play it again. And this time I won't get turned into a zombie. And then some people, I've also played it with people who are actually genuinely so scared of the zombie princess, they're almost too scared to move.
Oh.
And that's interesting, and it kind of
Hmm.
it exaggerates people's innate characters when they're playing the game. If they're reckless,
Hmm.
they'll take risks. If they're a bit cautious, they'll tiptoe around. So I think a good game should tell
Hmm.
you a little bit about how you are as a person, and should illustrate
Hmm.
your character. And I'm hoping that the zombie princess does that with people in a fun way.
I like that. So you've shared several of these already, but if you had to share one more tip with aspiring designers who, wanna make games, wanna
Yeah,
maybe get their game published one day, what would
yeah.
that tip be?
I get asked this quite a lot actually, and my biggest tip is to do it.
Hmm.
If you have an idea is worth nothing unless you do something with it.
Hmm.
So make that first prototype and play it.
Hmm.
That's all I can say. Because if you don't make it and test it, it'll never get to the next step. And when something isn't working, analyze it, change it, make it again, do it again, and
Hmm.
enjoy the process, because it's about I see it as a bit like sculpting, where you have at the start off you've got this big piece of granite or
Right.
marble, and inside is this perfect game, and you're chipping
Hmm.
away at the granite, and you find bits that are working, and you keep chipping away at it, and it takes a long time,
Hmm.
and inside your game is there, but you've got to put the time and the work in to do
Hmm.
it, and um, and it can be an incredibly enjoyable process, especially
Hmm.
when it brings pleasure to the people who are playing it. So my advice is to just, it sounds so simple, but to do it. Stop thinking, stop talking, and start doing.
Hmm.
Um, and make the process of doing it fun for yourself. So
Hmm.
get bits of card and glue and pens and paper, and enjoy making things with your hands, because the one thing I
Hmm.
would love about board games, they're physical objects that bring people around the
Right.
table together. They're not
Hmm.
computer games, they're not digital, they're tactile.
Hmm.
So think about how you're using your hands and your mind to make something that people are going to enjoy
Hmm.
playing with, because we're in the business of playing,
Right.
and play is such a wonderful way to bring people together.
Absolutely. Um, so what can we look forward to coming from Andrew Beardsley
Ah,
plans in the future?
well, I've
Anything you
got
got coming?
yeah, I've got well, I'm working on, as I say, I'm working on about half a dozen games. I've got one, I've got two that are, well, no, having said that, I've got three or four that are practically finished. So
I've got
the
one,
first,
two. Okay, no, I've got
what,
three.
yeah, what happens is that I get an idea,
Mhm.
and then the idea just lodges in my brain, and it's often connected to real life situations. So as I say, Zombie Princess was inspired by going to the Hampton Court Maze, and the game I immediately started working on, actually whilst I was developing Zombie Princess, is a cooperative gardening game called
Mhm.
Weeds, with the working title, and I love gardening. I've got a tiny garden
Mm-hmm.
in London, and it's one of my passions. And I was sitting in my garden pulling out weeds, thinking, what am I doing? These weeds are driving me nuts. I thought, there's a game here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a system. You're trying to create something, and there's another
Mm-hmm.
system trying to fight with you.
Right.
So in weeds, you're playing as gardeners working to grow flowers whilst
Mm-hmm.
fighting off weeds that are encroaching on the garden and
Mm-hmm.
snails that are trying to eat your plants. And you deal with the weather and uh, the plants die if there's not enough rain, if you don't water the garden. And it's got my little twisted sense of humor. You have a flamethrower. There's a character with a flamethrower. There's a character who can control the weeds with their mind, and you can have a cup of tea to get extra action points.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got that that little sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also working on another game called Playground, which is set in the playground, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
and the goal of the game is to go on 8 pieces of playground equipment, make 3 friends, and take them home to have tea. And
That's really sweet.
I think it could be a lovely game.
Mm-hmm.
It's got this mechanism called the excitometer, and the more
Mm-hmm.
excited you get, the more actions you get. And every time you go on the swings, you get more excited. But the downside is that to go on the swings, you have to roll a dice,
Mm-hmm.
and the more excited you are, the more chances you have of falling off the swings.
Mm-hmm.
So it simulates the idea of a child getting so excited that they fall over their feet, or
Right.
you know, and when you're less excited,
Mm-hmm.
you're more careful, but you have
Mm-hmm.
fewer action points. So there's this
Mm-hmm.
kind of, do I get really excited and risk having a tantrum, in which case your
Right.
mum tells you to go home because you've been,
Mm-hmm.
or do you stay calm and
Mm-hmm.
slowly go around the playground and don't fall off anything? And there's a kitten and there's a puppy and there's the bully who can push you off the slide, and an ice cream van that comes and goes. So
Mm-hmm.
as I say, my games are all based on real experiences. I'm not big
Mm-hmm.
on the fantasy worlds,
Right.
but I like the idea of taking a real life situation and saying, how can this be a game? And
Mm-hmm.
everybody as a kid played in the playground, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody had an ice cream and went down the slide and fell off the
Mm-hmm.
swings.
It's
And
relatable.
it's everyone has good memories of that,
Right.
and bad memories where they fall over, but that's in the game as well. So
Mm-hmm.
so that's another one I'm working on at the moment, and
I
lots of
really love
others,
those.
lots of other
Mhm.
ideas.
They sound
So
incredible, honestly.
yeah.
Like you're talking a lot about how they're very like simple and like thematic, but they're also there's a word I'm trying to find. There's something relaxed. It's not the word I want, but it's the word I'm thinking of
Mhm.
right now. About the kind of the games like the weeds and the the playground. Like there's
Yeah,
something very unstressful. That is also not the word. I can't find the word, but whatever. You know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you mean, and I like that sort of that contradiction where you have quite not a mundane scenario or a setting, but a setting
Hmm.
that everyone's familiar with, and then injecting the element of chaos
Hmm.
and tension and excitement into that,
Hmm.
because life is full of everything you do every day and you take it for
Right.
granted, but then it's also full of challenges and excitement, and I want to replicate that in a fun way,
Hmm.
and surprises. So I hope my games have that kind of,
Hmm.
the combination of the familiar, comforting
Hmm.
situations, but have this element of fun. And fun, it all
Hmm.
comes down to, is it fun?
It's like effortless fun. I think effortless was the word I wanted.
That's if my games can be described as effortless, I would be so happy. That's not for me to say, but it's a fantastic thing to aim for.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like I said, when I get Zombie Princess to the table, I'll tweet out Zombie Princess is effortless fun. I love it.
Well, let's see if you win.
Ah, we'll see. So before I ask you the last question,
Yeah.
is there anything else you wanted to talk about that we didn't talk about already?
No, I just want to say a big thank you to you guys at WizKids for being so supportive,
Mm-hmm.
and also for being so patient with me, because I did not know what I was doing as a designer. So
Right.
every email I sent to Zev, I was thinking, okay, Zev, I need to ask you what I do with this,
Mm-hmm.
and I just didn't know what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for your patience and your support, because it's been such a fantastic experience.
We're
And
lucky to have a design like this. So
the product is so great. So I'm
mhm.
just really excited about it. But thanks, guys.
Thank you. You're welcome from the whole WizKids team
Yeah.
on behalf of WizKids. All right, so one last question. I ask everyone who comes on my show this, including Zev last week, who did not like me asking this because I made him
I,
pick.
I saw that, and he I watched that, and he had
Mhm.
lots to say.
What is your favorite WizKids game other than your own?
One that I really like that I think is actually really unique and distinctive is SEAL
Mhm.
Team Flicks, which
Okay.
it's for those of you who don't know, it's a sort of uh, a combination of a flicking game and a combat game. So
Hmm.
it's a really unique and thematic combination of game types. And the
Hmm.
board actually has these very low 3D walls that
Hmm.
simulate rooms. So you enter the door, and the combat is done through flicking, and it's
Hmm.
it's it's really unique and interesting, and a really good production as well. So
Yeah, I
I'd
really like
recommend
SEAL
that.
Team
Yeah,
Flicks.
yeah.
I SEAL Team Flicks was actually I think it was the first WizKids game to come out right when I started working for
Okay,
WizKids. So it has a special place in my
it's
heart.
good memories for
My
you.
first WizKids game.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking to me. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
All right. And thank you so much for tuning in to Much Ado About Gaming and this wonderful interview with Andrew Beardsley, designer of Zombie Princess and the Enchanted Maze. This is a game we are so excited about. It's going to be a lot of fun. I still have not gotten it to the table because immediately after I did this interview, literally the next day, I got sick. So, but I'm not sick anymore, so I'm going to try and play it very, very soon. Maybe even tonight, who knows? Uh, Zombie Princess and the Enchanted Maze is coming out this month. It plays in 45 to 60 minutes for 2 to 5 players, and it is $39.99. So definitely pre order it at your friendly local game store or online today. And don't forget to tune in tomorrow to Model Behavior, where we are doing a fall update on our Dungeons and Dragons product. That's tomorrow, Wednesday, October 20th at noon Eastern Standard Time. I hope I'll see you there. It is also pre-recorded, so I will be answering questions in the chat. But it's going to be a lot of fun. We have a really great lineup, and we're very excited for it. If you want to follow us on social media, we are WizKids Games on Instagram, and WizKids Games on Twitter, and WizKids on Facebook. You can also follow me. I am at _Blackthorne on all social media. I am Jessa Blackthorne on Facebook. I would love to chat with you if you have any questions about anything. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you have a wonderful week. I love you. WizKids loves you. Andrew loves you. Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks so much.